Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder.
What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Burning. This is a film that is currently on Hulu, directed by Chang-dong Lee. It's a Korean film. I literally have no idea how this movie was added to my many movie lists, watch lists on all the different streaming services. I listen to a lot of audio movie podcasts, and whenever there's movies that are recommended, I'll search and find what services they're available on and add them to my watch list. And this was on the top of one, and I don't remember how it came out in 2018, Korean film. This first time I've watched a movie by this director. But I love this movie. Going into a blind, it's a 2.5 hour long movie. It's in Korean, although there's not a whole lot of dialogue. It's very much like a neo-noir, like a mystery, but set in South Korea. Kind of also has a lot of metaphors and deals a lot with what debt, the struggle that it is to get out of debt in Korea and how difficult it is to get out of debt. It's very interesting to see themes that are in American culture. You know, debt is a big thing. Credit card debt is a huge issue in this country. And it's interesting to see, you know, people in other countries having similar issues, but through their lens, because, clearly things are kind of happening differently. There's also a criminal trial going on during this movie. You're seeing the differences in the haves and have-nots in South Korea. There's a character, Ben, who is a young wealthy dude, where how he makes his money is very ambiguous. You never really know, but he's got tons of money, and he's young, right? It's played by Steven Yeun, which amazing acting in this film. Also, Steven Yeun plays Ben. The main character, the lead, is Jong-su Lee, who is played by Yu Ah-in, or Ah-in-yu, I think. Forgive me if I mispronounce or misorder the first and last names of these Korean names. But Ah-in-yu, the lead, who plays his character in this, is Jong-su Lee. Was in another movie that I watched fairly recently, within the last year, on Netflix, called It's #Alive, which is an interesting zombie film, kind of smaller scale, self-contained. He's basically stranded inside of an empty apartment building during a zombie apocalypse. Good movie, but his performance in this was amazing. And I saw him at first, when he first showed up in this movie, I was like, oh, that's the dude from that zombie movie. And then I had to double-check IMDb, to make sure I'm not just being racist. Thankfully, it was him. Amazing performance in this. Steven Yeun is amazing. I haven't seen Minari yet, but I've heard it's great. So anyway, this movie is Jong-su, the main character. He's like a guy just kind of working, trying to make money. He comes from the poor part of South Korea. His dad owns a piece of land right by the North Korean border, between South and North, so close that you can hear the North Korean propaganda being spewed from their speakers, their loudspeakers. And it's just like this very poor, like a lot of shacks. Some people have houses, some people are in shacks, some people are in broken down RVs. It's kind of like definitely lower class poverty, kind of on the scale of income. He has a little ranch, little cattle ranch. So very modest, kind of, rural kind of upbringing that he comes from, Jong-su. And he's in the city trying to make ends meet, but he's got to go back home because his dad is in a little legal trouble. He meets somebody who is from his old town, who is in the city also working as like a kind of a barker on the street. There's these girls on the street with microphones doing dances, trying to entice people to come into stores. And you find out that that's like a job that a lot of girls that are in a lot of debt do, because it's an easy job, but a lot of turnover. But there's a lot of, like, the theme of debt in this film is heavy. Like, there's a lot of, like, his mom Jong-su's mom like left the family, and she was in a ton of debt. Like he goes and meets with her later on. You find out that she's in a ton of debt, and Jong-su wants to help get her out of debt. I mean, a lot of this film, like in a lot of ways, is a metaphor for debt. And for how difficult it is to get out of debt. I mean, you have the contrast of Ben, who's this wealthy young person, and then you have like surrounded by a bunch of people that are just struggling to get out of debt. You have the main female character, Haemi Shin, Haemi, 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 Shin. She's like, you never really find out. Like, the thing about this film is like everything's kind of a mystery. You don't really know a whole lot about anything, but as the film goes, you learn little bits and pieces about why Hey Mai is like potentially acting like she is. You find out that she's potentially in a ton of debt because she's doing this kind of job that a lot of people are in that kind of debt do. At one point in this film, she disappears and just goes missing, and for the rest of the film, you don't know what happened to her. You don't know if, potentially something, she was murdered. You don't know if she ran away, because a lot of people who are in a lot of debt tend to just disappear to avoid the debt collectors. So it's a lot of like, and also the main character, his family's, dealing with money. It's just like, it's interesting. And you also get to see just how people live. You get to see the neighborhoods of the different people. There's just so much contrast. There's this metaphor where Hey Mai, when she was a kid, she tells this story to Jong-su about this time she fell in a well. They were neighbors, and she fell in this well by her house, and she just waited there forever, looking up at this hole, blackness, but this hole in the sky, just waiting for somebody to come save her. And that, in a lot of ways, that story, which you don't even know if that story is true or not. Like, there's a lot of it's like a movie that has tons of mystery in it, but it does well to kind of, in my opinion, guide the viewer in a direction where by the end of the film, you're not 100% sure that the outcome was justified, but it's a pretty good assumption. But you don't know for sure. Nothing's ever fully answered. It's just like you're given just enough, which is similar to real life. It's like you never really know. You can't know everything. You can't know all of the angles and the factors that go into different things. But you can kind of gauge and get a good idea of what happened and get a good feel for what's going on. And that's what this movie does in a lot of ways. It does it so well. And then you have there's kind of like this love connection between Jong Lee and Hey Mai, because they grew up together. She had a crush on him, and Jong-su was kind of an asshole. And she tells this other story about this time, like the only time he talked to her, how he told her she was ugly. And because of that, she ended up, when she got older, she got like plastic surgery, and potentially that's why she's in debt for getting that plastic surgery. But then there's this other scene where like he's got a crush on, he's like crushing on her, he's falling for her, and she brings Stephen Yeun's character Ben. She goes on like this kind of this journey to kind of discover herself. She goes to Africa, and when she comes back, she brings Ben that she met on this thing, and Ben's the wealthy guy. And so now Jong-su's jealous. He was like falling for her while she was gone because he was taking care of her cat. He was house sitting for her, and he kind of like formed this relationship with her in his head. And so when she comes back with Ben, it's like he's being respectful in the whole thing, but you can tell that he's got feelings for her. And there's this scene where they're hanging out at Jong-su's dad's place that's out in by the border with the kind of out in open fields, and it's this beautiful scene where they all smoke weed, and Hey Mai, she's dancing. She was telling the story earlier about this dance that the Africans were doing around this fire, and she was like reenacting it for Ben's friends. And then scenes later when they're at like the sunset's happening, they just smoke weed, and she starts dancing. She gets naked, and just kind of, you only see like a silhouette of her, but she's like dancing her silhouette in this beautiful, it's like this beautiful scene. There's no dialogue. It's just her dancing to this jazz music that's playing in the background. It's beautiful. And then Ben tells Jong-su this I guess story, or he confesses this secret about himself, that every 2 months he burns down an abandoned greenhouse. And out in out in the rural parts, the farm parts, there's a lot of greenhouses and a lot of abandoned ones. So Ben tells Jong-su this, and so Jong-su's like, and Ben's gonna do it. He's gonna burn down one of them around his place. Like, so Jong-su starts running and trying to keep tabs on all these abandoned greenhouses to see when he burns it down. And that in itself, there's this whole, like, every 2 months he burns down a greenhouse. And in my opinion, that's a metaphor. That's kind of Ben saying that, like, he's in these relationships, like his relationship with Jaime. He likes going out, like, slumming it. I think he preys on these girls that have a lot of debt because he has a lot of money. So they think that he's going to help them get out of debt. And he goes and he has these like 2-month relationships with them. And then he metaphorically burns them down. Like, they are the greenhouse, and that he burns them down. But it's played, he tells it as if he actually is burning greenhouses down. And Jong-su has a memory of when he was a child of a greenhouse that was on flames. And it was very beautiful. And Ben, speaking about, it's a very beautiful scene where he's telling Jong-su about burning down these greenhouses. But in my opinion, putting all the pieces together after seeing the entire film, it really feels like Ben preys on these girls, burns them down, as in breaks up with them, or maybe does something else, potentially murders them, because none of the greenhouses around Jong-su's house were burnt down. And he later confronts Ben, and Ben says, yeah, I burnt it down. But that's also the time when Hey Mai goes missing. So the movie's playing it as if, because it only gives you enough, as if Ben is actually literally burning down greenhouses. But it feels as if the reality of the situation is that Ben knows that he can get rid of, like, maybe he started off burning down greenhouses, and now every 2 months he just makes somebody that they're known for disappearing. Like, earlier in the film, like, Jong-su talks to one of Hai Mai's co-workers, and she says, I don't know what happened to her, she just disappeared. But a lot of these girls, they're in a lot of debt, and if they can't make it work, then they end up disappearing to hide from the debt collectors. So it's like, we don't know if she disappeared, but there's a scene where Jong-su, he's at Ben's place because he's like following him, he's investigating him. It's a very neo-noir type of thing. He's trying to find out where Hey Mai is, and Ben, he's like tagging Ben. He's following him from his house, and that you're seeing, like, the haves and have-nots, how differently people live in South Korea with money and without money. But he goes to his house because they've been friendly. Ben thinks of him as a friend, and invites him to a dinner. And he goes into his apartment, which he's been in before. And he goes to the place where he had seen before, where he opened up this little drawer inside of a cabinet, and it had like women's earrings, like assorted earrings and bracelets and things like that. And he goes and he looks again, and there's this watch that in the beginning of the movie Jong-su gave to Hey Mai, and it's this like tacky watch that he won in a raffle, and he sees it in there. And that's when, in my opinion, the movie doesn't explicitly say anything, but in my opinion, you're not sure. And Ben also has her cat, which you never saw before, but the cat had a name, and Jong-su, the cat gets loose, and Jong-su is able to call the cat to him using that name. So he's able to put together that cat was her cat, and that, like, it's such a good movie. Everything's so well told, but all the pieces come together to where it at first felt like Hey Mai just ran off. She just disappeared. Ben broke up with her, and she just disappeared. But all the pieces start to fall into place that maybe Ben burnt down the greenhouse, quote unquote, as in, made her disappear. And then that little drawer were souvenirs of all of the women that he's done this to. So Jong-su, and as a viewer, I'm like, oh shit. And then the end of the film where Jong-su confronts Ben and it's kind of this crazy ending is amazing. I mean, so much of this film, it's beautifully shot. All the acting's amazing. The story's crazy. I don't know if anything I just said made any sense whatsoever, but there are so many amazing moments in this film. The fact that it doesn't give you everything and that you're like, it just gives you enough to kind of, like, it gives you like 90% of the information where it's like you're not 100% sure, but it's gotta be. Right? There's no other reason why Ben would have her cat. There's no other reason why Ben would have this watch newly added after she disappeared. Unless she disappeared and ditched the cat with them. But it didn't really seem like that. Ben wasn't really acting like that. Like, so much of the mystery of the story relies on the performances and relies on just the little trickle of information that this director gives you. And it's a beautiful film that, like, it's really one of those films that made my brain, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Just all of the themes, especially like the debt and just like how Hai Mei's character is like just any person that's buried in debt, and like that well story. That's what it feels like when you're just like, you just need somebody to help you get out of this situation. And her family just will not talk to her unless she gets out of debt. Like, that's such a huge thing in South Korea, according to this film, that like families will discommunicate from you if you get in too much debt. Amazing film. I could talk about this for a long time, or at least, randomly spout out words and sentences in reference to it. But I highly recommend watching it. The film is Burning. It is currently on Hulu, and it's directed by Chang-dong Lee. Check it out. Do you like audiobooks? Of course you do. You like listening to stuff. You're listening to this, or you're watching it. I don't know what you're doing, but you're definitely listening to my voice, and you can listen to a lot of other voices tell you stories from actual books through the service known as Audible. And because you are a listener of this show, you get 2 free audiobooks when you use my link. Go to inspireddisorder.com/audible. That's AUDIBLE. You'll get 2 free books for signing up. You can cancel at any time, but if you keep your membership, you get an additional book every month. Your subscription and membership comes with Audible originals, guided wellness programs, news, and so much more. Get yourself 2 free audiobooks by going through my link, inspireddisorder.com/audible. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at patreon.com/inspireddisorder. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com, and follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!